In this lesson, we're going to learn how to communicate with other scripts and components that are on the exact same object. So here inside of Unity, I've just opened up a 03 begin, which is very similar to our main level. And for the script that we're going to be editing, we're taking a copy of the game loop or the game state script that needs to talk to the render on the same object. So here we have our game state object, which controls the timer, when the rounds are over, if the players died, how many enemies they've killed, so on and so forth. Now we also have another script on this that controls the render. So if we take this and we bring it all the way up to white and hit play, we can see that our render appears on our game screen, or our get ready screen. Now we need to be able to control this from within our game state script. So let's take a look at how we can connect these two together. So here is the game state that I've opened up here, and I've taken out some of the code, so we currently have no connection to that other object. So to begin with, for the sake of speed, we always want to cache our connections locally. So that means that whenever we get another object or get another script using any of these methods, we need to cache that into a variable. And in this lesson, we're going to be looking at the function call and the get methods. Okay, so let's begin by writing down the variable. So we know we need a variable, and this is going to be our render. Let's see, this is going to be the render on our same object, so we can just call this our render full screen. And let's take a look at what the name of the script is. So here we can see the name of the script is display texture full screen. So we only want to get objects or components of this script type. So just to make sure, I'm going to copy the name of this script, jump back to our script here, and cast this with a colon into the type of the script name that we want to grab. Because we're grabbing essentially an instance of this script or an instance of this class. Now currently we don't know what it's going to be, so we'll put a semicolon there. And during the awake or the start function, we need to come in and we need to get the object or get the actual script that is on our object. And this is relatively simple. All we need to do is call a get component. And let me just come down here because I do have a little bit of code we're going to uncomment, and I'm just going to use this same variable name, render overlay, just to make it a little simpler later on. But again, the variable name doesn't matter, just something descriptive of what this object is. Alright, so in our start, we need to set this variable. So let's say render overlay is equal to, and then we need to get the component that we're trying to find. So get component, and then we need to get the type as system type. So the type of this is this display texture full screen, and that's essentially it. So now our render overlay object, or our render overlay variable, is going to be pointing to the component display texture full screen that is on our current object. Let's save this, jump back to Unity, and let's hit play. Make sure we don't have any errors here. And we don't. And if we go to our game state object, we won't be able to see it here. Actually, we can. So this render overlay here is connected to our game state object and the display texture full screen on this. So now we can call any function on this, as well as call or access any public variables. So let's take a look at this now. Let's jump back here and go to our display texture full screen. So we can access any of these variables that are not private and any of these functions by using the dot syntax. So for example, if we want to set the start color to black, all we need to do in our game state is type render overlay, which is the name of the variable that is holding the connection, render overlay dot, and then the function name. So let's see here, it's our set start color, and this is expecting a color, so we'll just feed it in with a new color, and let's just say color dot black. And hit save, and this is going to now pump the variable, or whatever we plug into the argument, into our script. So if we jump back to Unity, hit play, we can see that our beginning script is now black. Now it's not transparent because the alpha channel is still 100%, but we are overwriting the color of a different script from inside of our game start, or our game state. So let's go back here and let's actually set this to what we want, and we want it to be color.white to begin with, so color.white. And then we can access some of these functions later on. So to begin with, we want to start this at a white color, and we actually have another thing called set delay, which allows us to change the alpha channel to higher than 1. And so if we want our render to stay on the screen for 2 seconds at the beginning of the game, we can call render overlay dot set delay and then put a 2 in here. Let's take a look at this. So set delay, and it's looking for a float, so we can save that. And now it's going to set the alpha channel of that object, and I need to put in a semicolon, of course. It's going to set the alpha channel of that object based on that function. So this is how we can have scripts talk to each other. And if we take a look at the GUI script, we'll see the A value is 255, but internally it's actually storing it as a larger variable. So if we go to, let's see, our display texture here, and to see this happen, we actually need to turn on one last piece of functionality. So down here at the bottom, I just have a simple update function for our render overlay. So let's just delete our comments here and here. And they were commented so that we wouldn't get errors because we didn't have this variable in our game yet. And so this is very simple. So if the render overlay GUI color.a, so now we're accessing a member variable, which strident supporters of object-oriented principles will tell you it's breaking encapsulation, but sometimes we can do this, or sometimes it's okay. So we are actually going in and setting this variable explicitly in our game state, and we're actually testing to see if it's greater than 0. If it is greater than 0, and we do not want to display the render, and this is just a simple Boolean value of false or true, then we need to turn down our render overlay by calling this alpha down function. And we're using the delta time to bring that down. And we're essentially doing the inverse in our else if here. So if we actually do want to display the render, we need to alpha up. All right, so let's save this and jump back, and we can see now that we can control our render completely from inside of this game state script. And this is incredibly useful, being able to break off parts of your functionality into a different script, but still being able to control it from a central area. And so now we can turn on our display render, and it will go in and call the function on this display texture full screen. So you can see here, by changing a variable in our game state, we are actually controlling a different script. And this is the simplest way to connect two scripts together. And again, the Git component requires, or a blank Git component, as we use here, requires that it be on the exact same game object. So to just call Git component, both scripts are on the same object. Later on here, you'll notice we call Git component, but we are also calling it on a specific game object. And so when we call it without anything before it, it is assuming we're essentially saying this game object. So this works great for accessing scripts on the same game object, but now in the next lesson, let's take a look at how we can access scripts on other game objects with direct connections in our actual Unity game.